A retired police dog arrives at an isolated farm, where strange events begin to unfold. When all seems lost, he does something no one ever imagined. Dawn at Hillcrest Farm arrived first through sound. Emily Thompson, seated in her rocking chair on the porch, perceived the arrival of day long before the sun touched the horizon. Her ears captured the morning symphony, the distant crowing of roosters, the lazy mooing of cattle in the pasture, and the rustling of leaves in the cornfields moved by the cool morning breeze. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee invaded the porch, mingling with the scent of dew-dampened earth. Emily inhaled deeply, letting that familiar fragrance fill her lungs. Her fingers drummed softly on the arm of the chair, following a rhythm known only to her. "Mom, I brought your coffee." Sarah's gentle voice cut through the silence. Emily smiled, extending her hand with precision to receive the cup. After almost a decade without sight, her other senses had become extraordinarily keen. "Thank you, sweetie." "Has Michael already gone to check on the cattle?" asked Emily, sipping the hot coffee. The liquid went down comfortingly, bringing with it memories of similar mornings over the years. "Yes, he left early. Said he wanted to check the fence in the north pasture before the day's activities," Sarah replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Are you worried about something, Mom?" Emily paused for a moment, considering her daughter's question. There was something different in the air that morning, a restlessness she couldn't explain. Her senses, always so precise, seemed to detect a subtle disturbance in the farm's routine. "I'm not sure, Sarah. Maybe it's just my imagination, but..." Emily hesitated, not wanting to worry her daughter unnecessarily. "The wind feels different today." Sarah knew that tone in her mother's voice well. Since losing her sight, Emily had developed an almost supernatural connection with the farm. She could predict weather changes, sense when an animal was sick, and even identify visitors by the sound of their footsteps on the dirt road. The sound of hurried boots interrupted her thoughts. Michael appeared on the porch, breathless, his young face marked with concern. "Mom, Sarah, you need to know something." Emily straightened in her chair, her senses immediately alert. "What is it, son?" "The fence in the north pasture. It's knocked down. And it wasn't the cattle, I'm sure. There are strange marks on the ground. Looks like someone was there during the night," Michael explained, his voice trembling slightly. A heavy silence fell over the porch. Emily set her coffee cup on the side table, her fingers instinctively finding the rosary she always carried in her apron pocket. "Have you checked if any animals are missing?" asked Emily, keeping her voice calm, though her heart beat faster. "No, Mom. The herd is complete, but there's something else." Michael hesitated. "I found footprints near the tool shed, and some tools were out of place, as if someone had been messing with them." Sarah moved closer to her mother, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Emily covered her daughter's hand with her own, feeling the subtle tremor the girl was trying to hide. "We need to tell Jack," decided Emily, referring to the ex-cop who lived on the neighboring property and had always been a great friend of the family. "Sarah, can you go over there?" "I'll go right now," Sarah replied, already moving towards the porch stairs. "And Michael," called Emily, her voice firm despite her concern, "I want you to make a detailed record of everything you found that was different, every mark, every object out of place. Your eyes will be mine in this situation." The young man nodded, even knowing his mother couldn't see the gesture. "Yes, Mom, I'll write everything down." Emily remained seated, her hands now intertwined on her lap. The coffee cup cooled, forgotten beside her, while her mind worked actively. Years of experience in farm management had taught her that coincidences rarely existed in the countryside. The wind continued to blow, bringing with it the familiar sounds of the farm. But now, mixed with them, there was something else, a dissonant note that only Emily, with her keen perception, seemed to capture. Something was about to change in the quiet routine of Hillcrest Farm, and she needed to be prepared. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. Jack Anderson arrived at Hillcrest Farm shortly after noon. The strong son of Oakville made sweat trickle down his forehead as he parked his pickup truck near the main house. His experienced ex-cop eyes were already scanning the terrain, looking for signs of what Sarah had reported to him earlier. Emily heard the familiar engine, and the characteristic sound of Jack's boots on the porch steps. "Brought a surprise with me," he announced even before greeting her. The sound of heavy paws accompanied his steps. "What kind of surprise, Jack?" asked Emily, tilting her head slightly, her ears attentive to the new sound. "This is Rex," Jack answered, as an impressive Belgian Malinois shepherd positioned itself by his side. "An old companion of mine from the police force. He recently retired, and I thought he might be useful here on the farm." Emily extended her hand, feeling the dog's wet nose touch her fingers. Rex sniffed her gently, and she could sense the animal's strength and intelligence in its gentle touch. "Jack," Emily began, her voice revealing a mixture of gratitude and concern. "This has to do with what happened this morning, doesn't it?" The ex-cop pulled up a chair, sitting close to her. "Emily, you've known me long enough to know that I don't believe in coincidences. The marks Michael found, the knocked-down fence, this isn't the work of chance." Sarah and Michael, who had joined them on the porch, watched Rex with curiosity. The dog maintained an alert posture, its attentive eyes constantly scanning the surroundings of the property. "Is he trained?" asked Michael, fascinated by the dog's imposing presence. "Rex is one of the best dogs that ever worked with me," Jack replied with pride. "He has an exceptional sense of smell and an unparalleled protective instinct. He may seem intimidating, but he's extremely gentle with those he trusts." As if to confirm Jack's words, Rex approached Michael, allowing the boy to pet his soft fur. Sarah also came closer, marveling at the docility of the dog that, moments before, had seemed so austere. "But why now, Jack?" questioned Emily, her voice low so that only her friend could hear. "What aren't you telling me?" Jack sighed, carefully choosing his words. "I've been hearing stories, Emily. Other properties in the region have been reporting strange occurrences. Tools disappearing, damaged fences, mysterious footprints. Nothing serious yet, but enough to worry you," Emily completed, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Exactly," Jack confirmed. "Rex will help protect the farm. He has a sixth sense for danger, and believe me, no one gets past him unnoticed." Emily nodded slowly, her fingers finding Rex's fur again as the dog had approached her. There was something comforting about the animal's presence, a sense of security she didn't expect to feel so quickly. "And is he already trained to obey?" "New owners?" she asked, practical as always. "Rex is exceptional at that too," Jack assured. "He'll need a few days to adapt, but I guarantee he'll soon be perfectly integrated into your routine." The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to familiarizing Rex with the property. Jack led the dog through all the important corners of the farm, while Michael and Sarah watched fascinated as the animal memorized every detail of the terrain. Emily remained on the porch, her ears attentive to Jack's explanations about the basic commands Rex obeyed. There was something about the dog's presence that made her feel safer, as if a missing piece had finally found its place. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues that Emily could only imagine, Rex already demonstrated a surprising understanding of his new home. He moved with ease around the property, always maintaining a protective distance from the family. "He's already chosen you," Jack commented, satisfied, preparing to leave. "Rex has a loyal heart and a keen instinct. Trust him, and he'll never let you down." As Jack's pickup truck disappeared down the dirt road, Emily felt Rex settle at her feet on the porch. The dog let out a contented sigh, as if declaring he had found his place in the world. "Welcome to the family, Rex," Emily whispered, a soft smile on her lips. The night wind blew more gently now, and for the first time that day she felt that maybe, just maybe, the changes approaching weren't just cause for concern. The first week with Rex at Hillcrest Farm brought a new dynamic to the Thompson family's routine. The Belgian shepherd adapted quickly, as if he had always belonged to that place. During the day, he accompanied Michael in tasks with the cattle, demonstrating a natural ability to herd the animals. At night, he lay at Emily's feet on the porch, sharing with her the contemplative silence of starry nights. Sarah discovered in Rex an attentive companion during her morning walks to check the crops. The dog followed her steps with dedication, occasionally running ahead to investigate any suspicious noise. The young woman began to trust the animal's instincts, noticing how he always seemed to know when something was out of place. "It's impressive how he can predict things, Sarah commented to Emily one afternoon as they prepared dinner. The smell of fresh spices filled the kitchen, mixing with the aroma of beans slowly cooking on the wood stove. Emily smiled, her skilled hands peeling. Potatoes with the precision of someone who sees with their fingers. Rex has a special gift, honey. Just as I learned to see the world differently, he sees beyond what our eyes can perceive. From outside, Rex's deep bark cut through the quiet of the afternoon. It wasn't his usual alert bark for known visitors, but something more intense, more urgent. Emily immediately stopped what she was doing, her keen senses picking up the change in the atmosphere. "Sarah, call your brother," Emily requested, her voice calm but masking the concern that was beginning to grow in her chest. Michael came running to the kitchen, still breathless from work in the field. "Rex has been agitated since mid-afternoon," he reported. "He keeps sniffing the air and looking in the direction of the north pasture, where we found the broken fence last week." Emily stood up, her movements sure despite the darkness that surrounded her. "Let's take a walk around the property before it gets dark. Michael, get the big flashlight from the hallway closet. Sarah, let Jack know over the radio that we're going to do a round." The three set out into the evening, Rex immediately assuming the position of guide. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with hues that Emily could only imagine, but which her children described as a spectacle of orange and purple colors. The dog led them directly to the north pasture, his body tense, demonstrating that something wasn't right. As they approached the recently repaired fence, Rex stopped abruptly, his nose pointed to the ground. "There's something here," Michael murmured, directing the flashlight beam to where Rex was sniffing. On the damp ground, partially hidden by the low vegetation, tire tracks cut through the earth in a pattern that didn't belong to any of the farm vehicles. Emily crouched down, her sensitive fingers touching the soil. "These marks are recent," she noted. Years of experience with the land allowed her to identify the age of disturbances in the soil. "The morning dew hasn't had time to settle the disturbed earth yet." Sarah observed the surroundings with redoubled attention, noticing details that before might have gone unnoticed. "There are boot marks too, Mum, different from the ones we use here on the farm." Rex remained alert, his muscles tense under his shiny coat. Occasionally he would raise his head and sniff the air as if trying to catch a specific scent on the evening breeze. "Let's go back to the house," Emily decided, her voice firm. "Michael, I want you and Rex to do one last check on the stables before nightfall." Sarah called Jack again and report what we found. On the way back, Emily reflected on the events. Her sharp mind was beginning to form a pattern with all the incidents of recent weeks. The broken fences, the tools out of place, and now these mysterious marks. Everything indicated systematic surveillance of the property. When they reached the house, the sky was already completely dark. The porch lights cast elongated shadows across the yard, while the nocturnal sounds of the farm began their familiar symphony. Rex positioned himself strategically on the porch, his attentive eyes scanning the darkness. "Today no one goes out alone," Emily determined, her voice leaving no room for arguments. "Whatever the reason for these visits, we can't let our guard down." The children nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As they prepared for another night at Hillcrest Farm, a silent certainty hung in the air. Something was about to happen, and thanks to Rex, they wouldn't be caught by surprise. Jack arrived at Hillcrest Farm the next morning before the sun had fully risen. His usually serene face carried a grave expression that didn't go unnoticed by Emily, even without being able to see him. The sound of his steps on the porch had a different weight, more urgent than usual. "Emily, we need to talk," he said after initial greetings. "The situation is more serious than we thought." Sarah served coffee for everyone at the kitchen table, while Rex maintained an alert sitting position near the door, his ears moving at each new sound. Michael, who had just returned from his morning round with the dog, joined them. "Last night, after you told me about the tire marks, I made some calls," Jack began, his coffee cup forgotten in front of him. 3 other farms in the region reported similar occurrences in recent weeks. Damaged fences, strange marks, suspicious movements during the night. Emily interlaced her fingers on the table, her face showing a calmness that didn't match the tension she felt inside. "You think they're observing the properties?" "I'm sure of it," Jack replied, leaning forward. "And more than that. I found this last night during a round I did after receiving your call." The sound of something being placed on the wooden table made Emily tilt her head with curiosity. Sarah let out an exclamation of surprise, and Michael moved closer to examine the object better. "It's a camera," Jack explained. "Small, water-resistant with wireless transmission. It was hidden among the foliage near the tool shed. Cutting-edge technology, not common equipment." "So they really are watching us," Sarah murmured, her voice trembling slightly. Emily extended her hand, her sensitive fingers exploring the small device. "That's why Rex was so agitated in that direction," she concluded. "He must have smelled whoever installed this." "Exactly," Jack confirmed. "And there's more. The Johnson farm, 3 miles from here, also found similar equipment. Someone is systematically monitoring the properties in the region." Michael, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "But why? What do they want?" "That's what we need to find out," Jack replied, his voice carrying the weight of years of police experience. "For now, let's keep this between us. The fewer people who know, the better." Emily stood up from the table, her movements precise even without seeing. She went to the old wooden chest in the corner of the kitchen, the one that kept the family's most important memories. Her fingers easily found what she was looking for, a thick envelope kept for years. "I think it's time you knew something," she said, returning to the table. "Something your father made me promise to reveal only if it was really necessary." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft sound of Rex's breathing, who had approached Emily as if sensing her apprehension. "Before I lost my sight, before your father passed, he told me about something valuable hidden in these lands," Emily began, her hands caressing the envelope carefully. "Something that other people might want to find." Sarah and Michael exchanged surprised looks while Jack adjusted in his chair, his attention fully focused on Emily's words. "Your father was a cautious man," she continued, her voice laden with memories. "He knew that one day someone might come looking for this, so he left specific instructions, maps, and documents, all stored in this envelope." "But why did you never tell us before, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice barely disguising the confusion. "Because your father believed that knowledge can also be a burden," Emily replied softly, "and he wanted to protect you from that weight for as long as possible. But now with everything that's happening..." Rex suddenly raised his head and let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the kitchen window. The group immediately fell silent, years of country life having taught them to trust the instincts of animals. "We'll continue this conversation later," Jack said, standing up cautiously. "Now we need to act. Michael, you and Rex do a complete round of the property. Sarah, I want you to record every suspicious movement you notice. And Emily..." "I know," she interrupted, putting the envelope back in the chest. "It's time to reveal the secrets of the past, but let's do this carefully, very carefully." That same night, after making sure the property was secure, Emily gathered the family in the living room. The curtains were carefully closed, and Rexy stood guard near the door, his ears attentive to any suspicious movement from outside. With delicate fingers, Emily opened the envelope she had kept for so many years. The smell of old paper filled the room, bringing with it memories of a time that seemed so distant. Jack, sitting beside her, helped organize the documents she carefully removed. "Your father," Emily began, her voice laden with emotion, "discovered something during the renovation of the old mansion, shortly before I lost my sight. Something that completely changed his way of seeing the history of this land." Sarah held her mother's hand, offering silent support, while Michael leaned forward in his chair, eager to learn more about his family's past. "Between the walls of the mansion," Emily continued, "he found old documents dating back to the colonial period, detailed maps of the region and records that indicated the existence of an ancient trade route that passed through these lands." Jack carefully unfolded one of the maps yellowed by time. His experienced eyes examined the faded markings, the mysterious symbols in the margins of the aged paper. "But it wasn't a common route," Emily explained, her fingers gently tracing the edges of the envelope. "According to the documents, There was a specific point on these lands where something of great value was stored. Your father spent years studying every detail, every mark on the terrain, trying to decipher the signs left in the past. And did he find it? Michael asked, his voice barely containing the expectation. Emily shook her head slightly. Not exactly, but he came close, very close, so close that it worried him. That's when he started taking extra precautions, preparing all this documentation, creating codes and references that only our family could understand. Sarah picked up one of the papers, carefully observing the notes made in her father's firm. Handwriting. There are numbers here, coordinates maybe, and markings that seem to relate to specific points on the farm. Your father, Jack interjected, was a brilliant man. He wouldn't leave such important information in an explicit way. Each mark, each seemingly casual annotation is part of a larger code. Rex suddenly raised his head and his ears moved. Everyone froze for a moment, alert, but the dog relaxed again after a few seconds, indicating there was no immediate danger. The intruders, Emily continued, her voice now lower, probably found out about these documents. Maybe they found similar records on other properties in the region. This would explain the surveillance pattern that Jack identified. But how would they know? Michael questioned. These documents have been kept all this time. Emily sighed deeply. Your father wasn't the only one to find clues over the years. Other people at different times may have discovered parts of this story. What makes our documents special is that they are the only complete clues that remain. And what exactly would be hidden here? Sarah asked, her curiosity evident in her voice. That, Emily replied, is something your father took with him. He believed that the less we knew about the specific content, the safer we would be. But he left precise instructions on how to proceed if someone ever came looking for this information. Jack carefully collected the documents, methodically organizing them. We need to decipher these markings before others do. Each symbol, each seemingly random number could be a crucial clue. And we need to be quick, Emily added. The fact that they've installed surveillance equipment means they're preparing to act. We can't let them find what they're looking for before we do. Rex moved restlessly again, this time approaching the window. His behavior alerted the group to the end of that conversation. It was time to put away the documents and reinforce the security of the house. From now on, Emily determined, carefully storing the envelope, we need to be even more alert. They are watching our every move, waiting for us to lead them to what they're looking for. The group dispersed silently, each absorbing the weight of the revelations of that night. As Emily stored the envelope in her secret hiding place, her sensitive fingers touched the aged paper once more. At that moment, she silently thanked her husband for his foresight and prayed they would have enough time to unravel this mystery before it was too late. The following morning brought with it a dense fog that covered Hillcrest Farm like a protective cloak. Emily, awake before dawn, could feel the moist air on her skin as Rex accompanied her on her morning walk along the porch. The dog maintained his steady pace beside her, serving as her eyes in that twilight. The documents mentioned something about the position of the sun, Emily murmured, more to herself than to Rex. Her hands touched the wood of the porch railing, feeling the marks left by time. Your father always paid special attention to the natural landmarks of the property. The familiar sound of footsteps announced Sarah's arrival, bringing with her the comforting aroma of freshly prepared coffee. Good morning, Mom. I brought your coffee and some notes I made last night. I couldn't sleep thinking about the documents. Emily accepted the offered cup, a soft smile on her lips. Tell me what you discovered, honey. The markings on the map, Sarah began, sitting next to her mother, aren't random. I noticed they form a pattern when overlaid on the current topography of the farm. Dad used to say that the land holds memory, remember? Yes, Emily replied, her memories returning to the long walks she used to take with her husband around the property. He always said that every elevation, every curve of the terrain tells a story. Michael joined them on the porch, carrying more papers. I found something interesting in Dad's notes, he said, his voice revealing contained enthusiasm. He made constant references to the old oak tree near the creek, the one that fell in last year's storm. Rex, who had been quiet until then, suddenly pricked up his ears. His tense body indicated that he had perceived something beyond the morning mist. "What is it, Rex?" Emily asked, her senses automatically sharpening in response to the dog's reaction. "Someone's approaching," Sarah whispered, peering through the mist. "It looks like... Jack?" Indeed, the ex-cop's silhouette emerged from the mist moments later, but his hurried step indicated urgency. Rex relaxed upon recognizing the friend, but maintained his vigilant posture. "You need to see this," Jack said as soon as he reached the porch. "I found more surveillance equipment this morning. Different from the previous ones, they're getting closer, tightening the circle." Emily felt her heart race, but kept her voice steady. "Where exactly?" "Near the fallen old oak," Jack replied, making Michael and Sarah exchange significant looks. "And there's more. I found recent marks on the ground indicating that someone was doing excavations during the night." "In the same place Dad mentioned in the notes," Michael murmured, quickly leafing through his papers. Emily stood up, her decision clear in her posture. "We need to act now. If they've already started digging, it means they've also deciphered part of the documents." "But Mom," Sarah interrupted, concern in her voice, "we're still not sure of the exact location. Dad's notes are complex, full of cross-references." "Maybe we don't need to be sure of the exact location," Emily replied, a plan forming in her mind. "Your father always said that the best way to protect something is to make others look in the wrong place." Jack understood immediately. "Are you suggesting we plant false clues?" "Not exactly false," Emily corrected, a subtle smile on her lips. "Just incomplete. Let's use their knowledge against themselves." Rex barked softly, as if approving the plan. Emily extended her hand, finding the dog's soft fur, seeking comfort in his constant presence. "Michael," she called, her voice low, but firm, "I want you and Jack to spread some more false clues. Make it look like we're as interested in this location as they are." Meanwhile, Jack asked, curious. "Meanwhile, Rex and I are going to pay a visit to a place your father only mentioned in whispers," Emily replied, rising with the grace of someone who knows every inch of the terrain under her feet. "A place that can only be found by those who know how to listen to the secrets of the land." Passing clouds cast dancing shadows over the group, as if nature itself was participating in their plan. Somewhere on the property, the real intruders watched and waited, not knowing that every step they took led them exactly where Emily wanted them to go. As the afternoon progressed at Hillcrest Farm, Sarah meticulously organized her father's notes. On the kitchen table, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the smell of damp earth coming through the window. A storm was approaching, and with it, a growing sense of urgency. "There's something here," she murmured, her fingers tracing the handwritten lines on the yellowed papers. Dad always repeated certain numbers in his notes. 3, 7, 12. It can't be a coincidence. The sound of footsteps on the porch made her look up. Emily entered, guided by Rex, her hair slightly disheveled by the wind that was beginning to blow stronger. "Sarah," Emily called, her voice carrying a contained urgency, "I need you to help me with something. Do the documents mention an old chapel?" The young woman quickly leafed through the pages in front of her. "Yes, there are several references to a chapel that existed on the property, but according to the notes it was destroyed decades ago." "That's what everyone thought," Emily replied, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "Your father discovered differently." Rex moved restlessly around the kitchen, his attentive eyes alternating between the two women and the window. Outside, the first raindrops were beginning to fall, creating a silver curtain that distorted the view of the property. "Mom," Sarah began hesitantly, "what exactly did Dad find?" Emily sat at the table, her hands instinctively seeking her daughter's. "The chapel was never destroyed, just hidden. Your father discovered that the old owners covered it with earth and vegetation to protect something inside." "But where would it be?" Sarah questioned, her mind working quickly. "We know every inch of this land." "Not all of it," Emily gently corrected. "There are places that can only be found when you know exactly where to look. Your father left the coordinates in the numbers you just mentioned." A distant thunder made the windows tremble. Rex raised his head, a low growl in his throat. "We have company," Emily whispered, her alert senses picking up sounds beyond the storm. Sarah moved silently to the window, peering through the curtain of rain. "There's a car parked on the main road. It's not from around here. They're waiting for the rain to keep us inside," Emily concluded. "But they don't know your mother as well as they think." With precise movements, Emily began to collect the documents scattered on the table. "Sarah, I want you to take these papers to Jack. He's at the old oak with Michael, planting more false clues. And you, Mom, Rex and I have a walk to take," Emily replied, a determined gleam on her face. "Your father used to say that the greatest secrets hide in plain sight. Today, I'm going to prove he was right." "But with this rain," Sarah protested. "The rain is our ally, honey," Emily interrupted. "It will make it harder for them to follow us, and the noise of the storm will mask our movements." Rex approached Emily, his posture indicating he was ready to depart. The rain was now falling heavily, turning the yard into a muddy field. "Before I go," Emily said, her voice serious, "I need you to memorize something. They're coordinates your father left encoded in the notes. 3 steps north of the big maple, 7 east of the marked stone, and 12 in the direction of the sunrise." Sarah repeated the coordinates mentally, understanding that each number she had found in the notes had a specific meaning. "When Jack asks about the documents," Emily continued, "just say you're following the clues from the oak. Let our observers keep focused there." A new thunder rumbled, closer this time. Rex remained alert, his muscles tense under his wet fur. "It's time," Emily declared, standing up. "The storm will give us the cover we need." Sarah hugged her mother briefly, feeling her heart tighten. "Be careful." "I always am," Emily smiled. "After all, I have the best guide anyone could ask for." With that, Emily and Rex disappeared into the curtain of rain, their silhouettes dissolving in the storm that battered Hillcrest Farm. Sarah watched from the window until she could no longer distinguish them, then clutched the documents to her chest and prepared for her own mission. The storm continued to grow, but for Emily each raindrop was a sign, each thunder a landmark in her journey. Somewhere on that ancient land, protected by decades of secrecy, the mystery her husband had worked so hard to protect waited to be revealed. The rain fell mercilessly on Hillcrest Farm, transforming the soil into a slippery carpet of mud. Emily advanced with sure steps, guided by the combination of her flawless memory of the terrain and Rex's constant presence by her side. The dog moved with precision, helping her avoid obstacles and keeping her on the right path. "To the right." "Rex," Emily murmured when they came close to the big maple. Her hands touched the trunk of the centuries-old tree, feeling the familiar grooves in the bark. "3 steps north, that's what your father said." The wind blew strongly, making the leaves of the trees dance to a tune that only Emily could truly hear. Each sound, each variation in the texture of the soil under her feet told a story that her eyes didn't need to see to understand. At another point on the property, Jack and Michael continued their act near the fallen oak. The heavy rain provided a natural curtain that made surveillance by the intruders difficult. "Do you think they're still watching?" Michael asked, his voice almost drowned out by the noise of the storm. Jack discreetly examined the surroundings. "Definitely, people like that don't give up easily. But your mother was brilliant in using the rain as cover." Meanwhile, Sarah had reached the barn, where she set up a small observation post. Through a crack in the wood, she could see the suspicious car still parked on the main road. Her hands firmly held the radio that connected her to Jack, ready to alert about any movement. Back at the center of the property, Emily and Rex had reached the marked stone. 7 steps east, she counted, moving carefully on the slippery mud. Rex stayed, glued to her side, his wet fur not diminishing his attention to the environment. The rain began to gradually decrease, turning into a fine drizzle that created a silver veil over the landscape. Emily stopped, her senses detecting a subtle change in the terrain under her feet. "Here, Rex," she said, crouching to touch the ground. Her sensitive fingers perceived a difference in the texture of the earth. The soil is different at this point, more compact, as if... An alert bark from Rex interrupted her thoughts. The dog had positioned himself protectively by her side, his muscles tense under his wet fur. "What is it, friend?" Emily whispered, her senses instantly alert. Years of country life had taught her to trust animal instincts. The radio in her pocket crackled softly. "Mum," Sarah's voice sounded quietly. "They're moving. The car started and is entering the property." Emily took a deep breath, staying calm. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes, maybe," Sarah replied. "Jack and Michael are maintaining the distraction at the oak, but I don't know how long it will work." "It's enough time," Emily declared, her hands returning to explore the ground. "Rex, I need you to stay alert. Show me if anyone approaches." The dog responded with a low sound of understanding, his attentive eyes scanning the surroundings while Emily continued her exploration. Her fingers found something, an irregularity in the soil that shouldn't be there. Following her instinct, Emily began to carefully clear the area, feeling under her fingers what seemed to be the top of a stone structure. 12 steps in the direction of sunrise, she murmured, remembering the coordinates. She moved with precision, counting each step. On the 12th step, her feet found a subtle elevation in the terrain. The distant sound of an approaching engine made Rex become even more alert. Emily knew her time was running out, but she also knew she was in the right place. "Here," she whispered, more to herself than to Rex. "Your father always said that the greatest secrets hide under our feet." Her hands were working quickly now, clearing away the vegetation and accumulated earth. Under her fingers, what seemed to be the outline of an ancient entrance, carefully camouflaged by years of natural growth, began to take shape. The radio crackled again. "Mom, they're splitting up," Sarah's worried voice sounded. "Two groups, one going to the oak and the other coming in our direction," Emily completed, feeling the urgency of the moment. "Don't worry, honey. We found what we were looking for." Rex let out a low growl, indicating that the intruders were approaching. Emily, however, smiled. Her hands had found exactly what her husband had described so many years ago, a secret entrance, protected by time and nature, guarding a secret that only her family had the right to discover. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. The moment of discovery was interrupted by the sound of breaking branches in the nearby vegetation. Rex positioned himself protectively in front of Emily, his body tense like a spring, ready to release. "Mrs. Thompson," Jack's familiar voice cut through the damp air. "Quick, they're coming!" Emily rose quickly, her hands still feeling the texture of the ancient entrance she had discovered. "Jack, here! We found it!" The ex-cop emerged from the wet vegetation, followed by Michael. Their faces showed a mixture of relief and concern. "We need to act fast," Jack said, already examining the area Emily had uncovered. "Sarah is keeping watch," Michael informed, helping to clear more of the vegetation covering the structure. "She said the second group is approaching from this direction." Emily nodded, her hands moving purposefully over the uncovered surface. "There's a mechanism here," she explained. "Your father showed me once before I lost my sight. He said it was the farm's most important secret." Rex barked softly, alerting about the approach of strangers. The sound of unfamiliar voices echoed across the property, still distant but rapidly approaching. "Mrs. Thompson," Jack called, his voice urgent but controlled. "We need to enter now, they're very close." Emily's fingers finally found what they were looking for, a small protrusion in the stone that, when pressed, revealed a narrow passage. The smell of ancient earth and stale air emerged from the opening. "Michael, tell your sister," Emily instructed. "Tell her to join us. She knows the alternative path." The young man quickly grabbed the radio, transmitting the instructions in a low voice. Meanwhile, Jack helped Emily descend the first steps of the newly discovered passage. Rex followed close on her heels, his presence a constant source of security. The passage was narrow but surprisingly well preserved. Jack illuminated the way with his cell phone flashlight, revealing stone steps that descended in a spiral. "Be careful with the steps," Emily warned, her tactile memory guiding her safely. "They're irregular on the third level." The sound of hurried footsteps above them echoed through the passage. Michael, who was bringing up the rear, held his breath. "They're here." "Let them search," Emily replied with surprising calmness. This entrance will close itself in moments, and they don't know the secret to open it. As if confirming her words, a soft sound of stones sliding against stone indicated that the entrance had closed. They were now completely isolated from the outside world, protected in the bowels of the earth. "Mom!" Sarah's voice echoed from a lateral corridor, surprising everyone except Emily. "I made it through the creek tunnel, as Dad had shown in the maps." The family gathered in a small space that opened at the end of the staircase. The light from the flashlights revealed walls covered with ancient symbols and, in the center of the space, a simple stone altar. "Your father kept something here," Emily said, moving confidently to the altar, "something he knew we would one day need to find." Her sensitive fingers explored the surface of the altar until they found a small recess. With a precise movement, she pressed a specific point, causing a secret drawer to open smoothly. The sound of footsteps and voices above them had transformed into a distant murmur. The intruders clearly hadn't discovered the secret entrance and were now searching the area in vain. "What is it, Mom?" Sarah asked, watching Emily remove a package wrapped in aged leather from the drawer. "The true history of our land," Emily replied, her fingers caressing the package reverently. "Your father discovered something that would change not just our lives but the history of this region, something that needed to be protected until the right moment." Rex remained alert, his ears attentive to any suspicious sound, while the family gathered around Emily. The moment of revelation had arrived, protected by the ancient underground chapel that had guarded its secrets for so long. "Now," Emily said, a serene smile on her lips, "I'm going to tell you what your father discovered, and why so many people were willing to do anything to find this place." The light from the flashlights danced on the ancient walls, creating shadows that seemed to tell their own stories. In the silence of the underground chapel, protected by the land they knew so well, the Thompson family was about to discover the true treasure they had been protecting without knowing. In the ancient underground chapel, the air was heavy with expectation as Emily carefully unwrapped the leather package. Her sensitive fingers moved reverently over the aged material, recognizing every texture and mark of time. "When your father found this place," Emily began, her voice softly echoing off the ancient walls, "he discovered much more than a simple, abandoned chapel. He found proof that Oakville holds a much deeper history than anyone imagined." From the package, she first removed a set of ancient documents, carefully preserved. Jack brought the flashlight closer, allowing Sarah and Michael to better see the yellowed papers. "These are deeds," Emily explained, "but they're not simple land documents. They're records of an agreement made over 200 years ago between the first inhabitants of this region and an expedition passing through here." Rex, always alert, maintained his position near the tunnel entrance, while the family gathered around the stone altar, where Emily began to reveal the mystery her husband had protected for so long. "The expedition," she continued, "was transporting something valuable, something that needed to be protected not just from thieves, but from time itself, and they chose this land, our land, as its guardian." Sarah carefully picked up one of the documents, her eyes scanning the lines of ancient calligraphy. "There are symbols here that look like the same ones on the walls," she observed. "Exactly," Emily confirmed. "Your father discovered that these symbols are actually a code, a map not just of places but of knowledge." Michael, who had been examining the walls with his flashlight, turned to his mother. "Knowledge of what?" Emily smiled, removing an object wrapped in fabric from the package. "Of something that changed the history of America, but was never recorded in official books." Gently, she removed the fabric, revealing an ancient book with an ornate leather cover. Its pages, though yellowed, were surprisingly well preserved. "This book," Emily said, her fingers tracing the inscriptions on the cover, "contains the true records of the formation of this region, stories of families who helped build this area but who were erased from official history. Among them, the story of our own family." Jack moved closer, intrigued. "Is that why there's so much interest from strangers in the property?" "Yes," Emily replied. "Some people discovered fragments of this history over the years. They knew there was a complete record somewhere, but they never managed to find it. Your father realized the historical value of what he had discovered and understood that he needed to protect it." But why so much secrecy? Sarah questioned. Emily sighed softly. Because this book doesn't just tell stories of the past. It contains information about places, about ancient families, about hidden fortunes that were never found. Your father knew that this information in the wrong hands could cause a lot of trouble. A distant noise made Rex prick up his ears. Everyone fell silent for a moment, but the sound didn't repeat. There's more, Emily continued, removing a final object from the package, a small carved wooden box. This box contains something even more precious than the book. It contains the proof that all the stories are true. Carefully, she opened the box, revealing a set of small objects, an ancient medallion, some coins, and a ring with a family seal. These are the physical evidence, Emily explained. The medallion belonged to one of the founding families of Oakville. The ring is the official seal that validated documents of the time, and the coins are special. Special how? Michael asked, fascinated. They're coins specially minted for a secret mission of the British Crown, Emily replied. A mission that was never officially recorded, but that forever changed the destiny of this region. Sarah, who'd been examining the book, looked up with sudden understanding. So it's not just about the past, it's about the present too. This information could still change many things today. Exactly, honey, Emily confirmed. That's why the intruders are so interested. It's not just about the history itself, but what it represents. Rights to lands, unclaimed inheritances, hidden fortunes. This book is a map to all of that. Jack, with his experience as an ex-cop, immediately understood the implications. And in the wrong hands, this information could cause enormous conflicts. Yes, Emily said, that's why your father created this entire protection system. He knew that one day someone would come looking for these secrets, but he also knew that only our family, who truly knows this land, would be able to protect them properly. Rex alerted the group again with a low growl. This time the sound of movement above them was clearer. They're still searching, Michael whispered. Let them search, Emily replied serenely. The true treasure isn't in the material value of these relics, but in the knowledge they hold. And now, it's up to us to decide how to use this knowledge in the right way. The family remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the weight of the revelation. The air in the ancient chapel seemed denser, charged with centuries of history and secrets. Rex maintained his constant vigil, his ears attentive to any suspicious movement coming from the surface. And now, Sarah asked, her voice barely containing the mix of emotions she felt. What will we do with all this? Emily carefully stored the objects back in the leather package, her movements precise and reverent. Your father left specific instructions about this too, she replied, removing an additional envelope from the bottom of the secret drawer. Jack brought his flashlight closer, allowing Michael and Sarah to see better. The envelope, sealed with wax, bore their father's familiar handwriting, to be opened only when the treasure is found. With careful fingers, Emily broke the seal. From inside the envelope, she removed several pages covered with her husband's firm handwriting. Sarah, could you read it to us? The young woman took the pages with slightly trembling hands and began to read. My beloved family, if you're reading this letter, it means you've found the treasure I protected for so long. It also means you've understood that the true value isn't in the gold or relics, but in the history they represent. This knowledge doesn't belong to a single family or person. It belongs to the history of our region, of our people. Therefore, I leave in your hands not just the objects and documents, but the responsibility to use them in the right way. Along with this letter, I also leave contacts of trusted historians and researchers, people who can help properly preserve and document these discoveries. The knowledge needs to be shared, but with wisdom and caution. Emily, my love, I always knew your special connection with our land would be fundamental to protecting this legacy. Sarah, Michael, you are the guardians of the next generation. I trust you to continue this work. Sarah paused, her voice choked with emotion. Emily extended her hand, finding her daughter's shoulder and gently squeezing it. There's more, Sarah continued, regaining her composure. In the secret drawer, you'll also find a USB drive. On it, I've digitally documented all the discoveries, including precise coordinates of other historical sites in the region. This is the real treasure map, not to find material riches, but to reconstruct the true history of our land. The time to reveal these secrets will come, but it must be done in the right way. I trust you to make the right decisions. With love, Robert Thompson. The silence that followed the reading was interrupted only by the distant sound of vehicles moving on the surface. The intruders apparently were beginning to give up their search. "Your father was right," Jack said after a moment. "This information needs to be protected and shared with wisdom." Emily nodded, her fingers finding the USB drive mentioned in the letter. "And now we have a new purpose," she declared. "Not just to protect these secrets, but to ensure they're used for the good of the entire community." "The historians mentioned in the letter," Michael began thoughtfully. "Could they help document everything properly?" "Yes," Emily replied. "Your father maintained contact with some of them over the years, people who share his vision about the importance of historical preservation." Rex, who had been quiet until then, suddenly raised his head, his ears moving in alert. The sound of vehicles moving away became increasingly distant. "They're leaving," Jack noted after carefully checking. "For now, at least." "And we," Emily said, standing up with the package secure in her hands, "have work to do. Your father's legacy isn't just about preserving the past, but about building a better future based on this knowledge." Sarah and Michael moved closer to their mother, forming a protective circle around her. Rex joined them, his body relaxing slightly now that the immediate danger had passed. "The first thing," Emily decided, "is to create digital copies of everything. Then we'll start contacting the people your father mentioned. We'll do this the right way, protecting both the history and the people involved." The group began to prepare to leave the underground chapel, but now with a new sense of purpose. The secret they had protected for so long wasn't just a treasure to be guarded, but a legacy to be shared with wisdom and responsibility. The next morning, Hillcrest. Farm awoke under a sky washed clean by the previous night's storm. Emily was in her chair on the porch as always, but now her face carried a different expression, a mixture of serenity and determination. Rex rested at her feet, still alert, but more relaxed after the events of the night before. Jack arrived, early, bringing important news. "The intruders have left the region," he informed, sitting near Emily. "I made contact with some old police colleagues. They're monitoring the situation." "Great," Emily replied, her fingers drumming softly on the arm of the chair. "That gives us the time we need to put everything in order." Sarah emerged from the house carrying a tray with fresh coffee and still warm cheese biscuits. The familiar aroma brought a sense of normalcy after the intense previous night. "I've started digitizing the documents," she said, serving the coffee. "Michael is helping organize everything into categories, as Dad suggested on the USB drive." Emily smiled, proud of her children's initiative. "And the contacts your father left?" "I've already located 3 of the historians mentioned in the list," Jack responded. "They're respected people, with serious work on the history of the region. One of them, in fact, worked with your husband in the past." "Professor Martinez," Emily guessed, recalling conversations with her husband. He always shared Robert's vision about the importance of preserving true history. Michael joined the group on the porch carrying a laptop. "Mom, I found something interesting in Dad's files. He kept a digital diary documenting each discovery he made. There are entries dating back more than 15 years. The sound of an approaching car made Rex raise his head, but his calm behavior indicated it was a known visitor. Moments later, Tom, the son of the neighboring farm's foreman, parked his jeep near the house. "Mrs. Thompson," he called, climbing the porch steps. "I brought news from town. The strange folks who were snooping around the area really have gone. But before they left, they were asking a lot of questions about the history of the old farms." "Thank you, Tom," Emily replied. "Your family has always been loyal to us. That's why I want you to be one of the first to know. We're about to reveal something important about the history of our region." The young man moved closer, curious, as Emily continued. "Your grandfather worked on this farm for many years. He probably knew part of this history, even if he didn't know all the details." "That's true," Tom confirmed. "Grandpa always said these lands held important secrets." "And he was right," said Emily. "But now it's time to share those secrets in the right way." not to create conflicts or disputes, but to honor the memory of all who helped build this region. Jack picked up his cell phone, checking some messages. Professor Martinez responded. He can come this week to start the documentation work. Perfect, Emily replied. Meanwhile, we need to prepare everything. Sarah, I want you and Michael to continue with the digitization of the documents. Jack, can you help organize a more permanent security system for the chapel? I'm already thinking about it, the ex-cop assured. We can install a discreet system that protects the place without drawing attention. Rex stood up and stretched, as if sensing it was time for his morning patrol around the property. Emily smiled as she heard the dog's movement. And you, my friend, she said, extending her hand to pet Rex's fur, will continue to be our watchful eyes. Thanks to you, we managed to protect not just the documents, but all the history they represent. The group spent the rest of the morning planning the next steps. The discovery in the underground chapel wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a new phase. A phase in which the secrets guarded for so long would finally be shared with the world, but in a way that honored the memory of all who had worked to preserve them. Your father would be proud, Jack said, watching Sarah and Michael working together to organize the documents. He always knew this day would come. Emily nodded, her face illuminated by the morning sun. Yes, he knew, and he prepared everything so we could do this the right way. Now it's our turn to continue his work, transforming secrets of the past into knowledge for the future. The week that followed was one of intense activity at Hillcrest Farm. Professor Martinez, a gentleman with graying hair and lively eyes, arrived bringing with him a small team of carefully selected researchers. Emily immediately perceived by the tone of his voice that he was exactly the kind of person her husband would trust. Mrs. Thompson, he said, after the initial introductions, Robert spoke a lot about you and your children over the years. I always knew that one day I would be called to help with something important, but I confess that the reality surpasses any expectation. The team set up a small documentation laboratory in the farm's office. Specialized equipment was brought in to photograph and catalog each item with the utmost care and precision. Each document, each object tells a story, the professor explained, to the family while supervising the work. It's not just about preserving the physical items, but about understanding the context in which they were created. Sarah absorbed every detail of the process, her natural curiosity finding a new purpose. Tell us, Professor, she asked during a break in the work, how are we going to ensure that this information is used in the right way? The professor smiled, approving of the question. That's why your father trusted you all so much. The concern isn't just with preservation, but with the impact these discoveries will have. Michael, who was helping organize the digital photographs, looked up from the computer. And what will that impact be? Immense, the professor replied, his eyes shining with contained enthusiasm. These documents not only fill important gaps in the region's history, but also correct some historical misconceptions. Some families will discover connections to the past they never imagined. Emily, who had been listening to the conversation, added, That's why we need to be careful. We don't want to create conflicts, but to unite people through knowledge of their roots. Rex, who always stayed close, showed his approval with a gentle tail wag. The dog had developed an immediate acceptance of the professor and his team, as if understanding the importance of their work. Jack, who was overseeing the installation of the new security system on the property, joined the group. The system is almost ready, he informed. Discreet but efficient, as we agreed. Excellent, Emily responded. And the cameras we found? They've all been removed, Jack assured, and we've installed motion sensors at strategic points on the property. Any suspicious activity will be immediately detected. Professor Martinez picked up one of the oldest documents, examining it reverently. You know, he began, in all my years of research, I've never seen such a well-preserved and significant collection. Your father wasn't just keeping objects. He was protecting the living memory of an era. And now, Sarah asked, how are we going to share all this with the public? Gradually, the professor replied. First, we'll create a complete and detailed catalog. Then we'll work with reputable institutions to organize exhibitions and academic publications. Each revelation will be made at the right time and in the appropriate manner. Emily smiled, satisfied with the plan. That's exactly how Robert would have wanted it. It's not just about revealing the truth, but about doing it in a way that benefits everyone. As the sun began to set, casting golden shadows through the office windows, the group continued their meticulous work. Rex occasionally made his rounds of the property, always returning to check on his family and the new visitors. "You know," said the professor, observing the dog, "there's something poetic about how all this unfolded. A retired police dog helping to protect historical secrets, a family united by the memory of their patriarch, and a group of researchers having the privilege of documenting it all. And it's not just about the past," Emily added, her voice laden with contained emotion. "It's about building bridges to the future, about ensuring that future generations know their true roots." As night fell over Hillcrest Farm, the group continued their work, each aware that they were participating in something greater than themselves. The history that had been protected for so long was finally emerging from the shadows, not as a source of conflict, but as a gift for future generations. 6 months had passed since the discoveries in the underground chapel. Hillcrest Farm had transformed into a discreet center of historical research, where past and present met in harmony. Emily, seated in her chair on the porch, could feel the changes in the air, not just in the different movements around the property, but in the very spirit of the place. The meticulous work of Professor Martinez and his team had revealed much more than historical documents. Each piece catalogued, each story documented, revealed a bit more about the rich cultural tapestry that formed the history of Oakville and the surrounding region. "Mom," Sarah called, approaching with animated steps. "We just received confirmation from the Historical Museum. They loved the proposal for the traveling exhibition." Emily smiled, extending her hand to hold her daughter's. "Your father always said this knowledge belonged to everyone. Now finally we can share it in the right way." Rex, who continued to be the family's faithful guardian, raised his head at the familiar sound of Jack's truck approaching. The ex-cop had become a constant presence at the farm, overseeing not just security, but actively participating in the historical preservation project. "I bring interesting news," Jack announced, climbing the porch steps. "Those who tried to invade the property, they were members of an international treasure hunting organization. When they discovered we turned everything into an official historical preservation project, they completely gave up. Michael, who had been working with Professor Martinez on digitizing the last documents, joined the group on the porch. And that's not all," he added. "Other families in the region have started bringing their own documents and stories. It's as if we've opened a door to the past." Emily nodded, satisfied. The sound of familiar footsteps announced the arrival of Professor Martinez, who joined the conversation with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, "we've finished the first volume of the catalogue. It's an extraordinary work, going far beyond simple historical documentation. These are stories of real people, of families who built this region with their own hands. And most importantly," Sarah added, "we managed to do everything exactly as Dad wanted, preserving not just the documents, but also protecting the people involved," the professor agreed. "The system we've developed, cataloging and sharing information in a controlled and responsible manner, is becoming a model for other similar projects in the country." Rex suddenly stood up, but not in alert. His tail wagged happily as he recognized the arrival of Tom, who was bringing more local residents interested in sharing their own family histories. "It's amazing how one discovery can unite so many people," Emily observed, hearing the animated voices approaching. "What started as a secret guarded by our family has turned into something much bigger." "And it doesn't stop there," said Jack. "The historical education project in local schools is ready to start next semester. Children will be able to learn about their own roots, about the real history of their land." Emily rose from her chair, leaning on Sarah's arm. "Let's welcome our visitors," she decided. "Each new story they bring is another piece in this great puzzle that is our history." As they walked into the house, where the space had been adapted to receive visitors and their stories, Emily reflected on how everything had changed. Hillcrest Farm was no longer just a place of secrets and mysteries. It had transformed into a meeting point between past and present, a place where stories could finally be told and preserved. Rex followed alongside Emily, his fur brushing softly against her leg, offering the silent support that had always been present since his arrival. The dog, who had been fundamental in protecting the family's secrets, now participated in the mission of preserving and sharing these stories. "You know," Emily said, pausing for a moment, "your father always said that the true value of a treasure isn't in what it's worth, but in what it means. What we discovered here is worth much more than any material wealth. It's the living history of our people." The sound of animated voices filled the house as more people arrived to share their stories. Each new account, each shared document, each rescued memory was another piece in the great mosaic of Oakville's history. Hillcrest Farm had transformed. It was no longer just the Thompson family property, but a place where the past was honored and preserved, where stories found voices to be told, and where secrets, instead of dividing, united people around their common roots. And so, under the sky of Oakville, history continued to be written, no longer in the shadows but in the light of day, preserved and shared for future generations, exactly as Robert Thompson had always dreamed. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of the Thompson family has touched your hearts and shown how the true treasure lies in the stories we share and preserve. To continue this journey of exciting discoveries, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking to your left. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Share your own family stories in the comments. Who knows how many treasures are still waiting to be discovered? Until next time.